The Watcher in the Pines. A park ranger's account from Blackwood National Forest. Part 1. The Arrival. The first time I saw the thing that wasn't quite right. I'd been a ranger at Blackwood National Forest for exactly 3 weeks. Blackwood sprawls across 847,000 acres of northern Montana wilderness, butting up against the Canadian border like a dark green bruise on the map. It's old forest, the kind that makes you feel small, where Douglas firs and western red cedars tower 200 feet overhead and block out so much sunlight that the forest floor exists in perpetual twilight. The park gets maybe 30,000 visitors a year, which sounds like a lot until you realize that's less than 100 people per day scattered across an area larger than Rhode Island. You can hike for days without seeing another soul. That's exactly what draws people here, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. My name is Sarah Winters, and I took the job at Blackwood for all the wrong reasons. I was running from a failed marriage in Seattle, from a career in environmental law that had burned me out by 32, from a life that had somehow become unrecognizable. When I saw the posting for a backcountry ranger position in one of the most remote national forests in the continental United States, I applied the same day. 2 interviews and 1 background check later, I was packing my life into a Subaru and driving east toward the mountains. The ranger station at Blackwood sits at the end of a 12-mile dirt road that branches off Highway 93. It's a cluster of log buildings that look like they haven't been updated since the 1970s. The main office, a maintenance shed, a small visitor center that's only open in summer, and 4 cabins for the rangers. During peak season, the station houses 8 rangers. In the off-season, October through April, that number drops to 3. I arrived on September 28th, just as the season was winding down. The head ranger, a weathered man in his late 50s named Tom Blackwood, no relation to the forest, he'd told me with a tired smile, gave me the tour. He was tall and lean, with the kind of permanent tan that comes from decades of outdoor work. His eyes were a pale blue that seemed to look through you rather than at you. "You picked an interesting time to start," he said as we walked the perimeter of the compound. "Most of the seasonal staff cleared out last week. It'll be just you, me, and Marcus until the snow really sets in." Marcus Chen was the other year-round ranger, a former Marine in his early 40s who'd been at Blackwood for 6 years. He was quiet, competent, and had the kind of watchful intensity that made me think he'd seen things he didn't talk about. When Tom introduced us, Marcus shook my hand and said, "Welcome to the middle of nowhere." He wasn't wrong. The nearest town, Whitefish, was 43 miles away. Cell service was non-existent. We had a satellite phone for emergencies and a radio system that worked maybe 70% of the time, depending on the weather and the position of the stars and whatever other mysterious factors governed communication in the wilderness. "You'll get used to the isolation," Tom said, showing me to my cabin. "Some people love it, some people can't handle it. We'll find out which kind you are." The cabin was small but comfortable. 1 room with a wood stove, a narrow bed, a desk, and a tiny bathroom with a shower that ran on a temperamental water heater. The windows looked out onto a wall of trees. I unpacked my things and tried not to think about how far I was from everything I'd ever known. That first week passed in a blur of training. Tom taught me the radio codes, the trail system, the protocols for everything from bear encounters to lost hikers to medical emergencies. Marcus showed me how to maintain the equipment, how to read the weather, how to move through the forest without making a sound. I learned that Blackwood had a reputation for strange disappearances. At least a dozen people had vanished in the park over the past 30 years. Their bodies never recovered. I learned that the Kootenai and Salish tribes considered certain areas of the forest sacred and refused to enter them. I learned that there were places in Blackwood where compasses spun uselessly and GPS units failed. "Every forest has its quirks," Tom said when I asked about it. "Blackwood just has more than most." On my 8th day, Tom assigned me my first solo patrol. The North Ridge Trail, a 12-mile loop that climbed through old-growth forest to a granite outcropping with views of the Canadian Rockies. It was rated as moderate difficulty, popular with experienced hikers, and according to the logbook, no one had been on it in 4 days. Just do a standard sweep, Tom instructed. Check the campsites, make sure the trail markers are intact, look for any hazards. You should be back by nightfall. I set out at dawn, my pack loaded with water, emergency supplies, and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. The trail was beautiful in the way that wild places are beautiful, indifferent to human presence, ancient, alive with the small sounds of birds and wind and running water. I fell into the rhythm of hiking, my boots finding purchase on the rocky path, my breath coming steady and deep. The first campsite was empty and clean. The second showed signs of recent use, a fire ring with cold ashes, some trampled grass, but nothing concerning. I was making good time, enjoying the solitude, thinking that maybe I'd made the right choice after all. I reached the granite outcropping around 2 in the afternoon. The view was spectacular, endless forest rolling away to the north, the mountains rising like broken teeth against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. I sat on the sun-warmed rock and ate my lunch and felt, for the first time in a long time, something like peace. That's when I saw it. Movement in the trees below, maybe 200 yards down the slope. At first I thought it was a deer or an elk, but the way it moved was wrong. Too fluid, too deliberate. It was walking upright. I pulled out my binoculars and focused on the spot. For a moment, I saw nothing but trees and shadows. Then it stepped into a shaft of sunlight, and my breath caught in my throat. It looked like a person, tall, maybe 6.5 feet, moving through the undergrowth with an odd, loping gait. But something about the proportions was off. The arms were too long, the head was too small, and it was naked, its skin a mottled gray-brown that seemed to shift and change in the dappled light. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds before it disappeared back into the shadows. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was a hiker, someone who'd gotten lost and disoriented, maybe suffering from hypothermia or a head injury. But I didn't believe it. Every instinct I had was screaming that what I'd seen wasn't human. I radioed back to the station. Tom's voice crackled through the static. "Go ahead, Sarah. I'm at the North Ridge overlook. I just saw. I think I saw someone on the slope below me, moving through the trees, but something's not right about them." A pause. "What do you mean, not right?" "I don't know. The way they were moving, they looked wrong." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you still see them?" "No, they went back into the forest." "Okay, mark the location on your GPS. Head back to the trail and continue your patrol. Keep your radio on and check in every 30 minutes. If you see them again, do not approach. Just observe and report." "Copy that." I packed up my lunch with hands that wouldn't quite steady. The peace I'd felt was gone, replaced by a crawling unease that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I looked down at the forest below, but there was nothing to see except trees and shadows and the slow dance of light through the canopy. The hike back should have taken 3 hours. I did it in 2.5, pushing hard, fighting the urge to look over my shoulder every few minutes. By the time I reached the ranger station, the sun was setting and my shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool air. Tom and Marcus were waiting for me in the office. Tom had a topographic map spread out on the desk. "Show me where you saw it," he said. I pointed to the spot on the map. Tom and Marcus exchanged a look I couldn't read. "That's near the old Kootenai site," Marcus said quietly. "What's the Kootenai site?" I asked. Tom folded the map. "There's a place about a mile from where you were. The Kootenai used to perform ceremonies there, back before the forest was designated as a park. They stopped coming in the 1950s, said the place had been corrupted, that something evil had moved in. You think what I saw has something to do with that?" I think, Tom said carefully, that you saw something. Whether it was a person or an animal or a trick of the light, I don't know. But you're not the first ranger to report seeing something strange in that area. What do you mean? Marcus spoke up. 3 years ago, a ranger named David Kowalski was doing a patrol on the North Ridge Trail. He radioed in saying he'd seen someone following him. Someone who moved wrong, he said, just like you described. We sent a search team, but we never found anyone. David requested a transfer 2 weeks later. Wouldn't talk about what he'd seen. And before that, Tom added, there were the hikers, 2008, a couple from Oregon. They were camping near the overlook. The woman made it out, said something had come into their camp in the middle of the night, something that looked like her husband but wasn't. The real husband was found 3 days later, 8 miles away, dead from exposure. The woman spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility. I felt cold. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Because it sounds crazy, Tom said. Because there's no proof. Because every time we investigate, we find nothing. No tracks, no evidence, nothing but stories and scared people. So what do? We do our jobs, Tom said. We keep people safe. We watch and we listen and we report anything unusual. And we don't go into the forest alone after dark. That night, I lay in my cabin and listened to the wind in the trees. I thought about the thing I'd seen, the way it had moved through the forest like it owned it. I thought about David Kowalski and the couple from Oregon and all the other people who'd seen something they couldn't explain. I thought about the word Marcus had used, corrupted. And I wondered what I'd got myself into. October came to Blackwood like a slow exhale. The aspens turned gold, then dropped their leaves in a single week of wind and rain. The temperature plunged. The few remaining hikers packed up and left, and the forest settled into the deep quiet that comes before winter. I didn't see the thing again, but I felt it. That's the only way I can describe it. When I was out on patrol, I'd get the sensation of being watched. I'd hear sounds that didn't quite fit, footsteps that stopped when I stopped, branches breaking in the distance, a low sound that might have been breathing or might have been the wind. I started carrying my sidearm everywhere, even though I knew a 9 wouldn't do much good against whatever was out there. Tom noticed. You're jumpy, he said one morning as we inventoried supplies. I don't like being watched. You think it's still out there. I know it is. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out a worn notebook from his desk drawer. I've been keeping records, he said. Every strange sighting, every unexplained incident, every time a ranger or a visitor reports something unusual, going back 20 years. He opened the notebook, and I saw pages filled with dates, locations, and brief descriptions written in Tom's neat handwriting. I scanned the entries. June 15, 2003, hiker reports seeing a man with wrong proportions near Clearwater Creek. Search finds nothing. September 22, 2005, Ranger Davis hears screaming in the forest. Sounds like a woman in distress. Investigation reveals no one in the area. October 8, 2008, the Oregon couple incident. July 4, 2011, family camping at Mirror Lake reports their dog went crazy in the middle of the night, barking at something in the trees. Dog found dead the next morning. No visible injuries. April 19, 2014, Ranger Kowalski reports being followed. August 30, 2016, solo hiker disappears from the North Ridge Trail. Never found. The list went on. Dozens of incidents, all following a similar pattern. Sightings of something that looked almost human but not quite. Animals acting strangely. People disappearing. And all of it concentrated in the northern section of the park, within a 5-mile radius of the old Kootenai site. Why haven't you reported this to someone? I asked. The Park Service, the FBI, someone. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. I did. Filed reports, requested investigations, the whole 9 yards. You know what happened? They sent a team out in 2009. Spent 2 weeks combing the area, found nothing. Concluded that the sightings were misidentifications of wildlife, that the disappearances were due to people getting lost in difficult terrain, that there was no evidence of anything unusual. They suggested I might be suffering from isolation-induced paranoia and recommended I take a leave of absence. But you didn't. No, because I know what I've seen, and I know what other people have seen, and I know that something is out there, whether the Park Service wants to acknowledge it or not. I looked at the notebook again. What do you think it is? Tom was quiet for a long moment. The Kootenai have a word for it. Ye naldlushe. It means with it he goes on all fours. White people call it a skinwalker. I'd heard the term before, vaguely, in the context of Navajo legends. I thought skinwalkers were a southwestern thing. The Navajo have their version, but the concept exists in a lot of Native American cultures. A person who can transform into an animal, or something that can take on the appearance of a person. The details vary, but the core idea is the same. Something that wears a skin that isn't its own. You're saying there's a shapeshifter in Blackwood National Forest. I'm saying there's something in these woods that doesn't follow the rules we think govern reality. Something old and malevolent and hungry. Call it what you want. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that he'd been in the wilderness too long, that there had to be a rational explanation. But I thought about the thing I'd seen, the way it had moved, the wrongness of it, and I couldn't. So what do? I asked. We survive, Tom said. We keep people out of the dangerous areas as much as we can. We watch each other's backs, and we hope it doesn't decide to come for us. That conversation happened on October 12th. On October 15th, everything changed. It started with a missing person report. A solo hiker named James Cartwright, 43 years old, from Boise, Idaho. He checked in at the ranger station on October 13th, saying he planned to hike the North Ridge Trail and camp at the Overlook for 2 nights. He was experienced, well-equipped, and had given us a detailed itinerary. He was supposed to check back in on October 15th by noon. By 2 p.m. he hadn't shown up. By 4 p.m. we'd organized a search party. Tom, Marcus, and I headed out with full packs and emergency gear. The plan was to hike to the Overlook, check the campsite, and work our way back along the trail, looking for any sign of Cartwright. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. We found his camp just before sunset. The tent was still standing, his gear neatly organized inside. His sleeping bag was laid out. His food was properly stored in a bare canister. Everything looked normal except for one thing. James Cartwright was gone. His pack's here, Marcus said, checking the tent. Water bottles, wallet, phone, everything. Tom was examining the ground around the campsite. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks except his own, leading from the tent to the fire ring. I walked the perimeter of the camp, my flashlight cutting through the gathering darkness. That's when I found them, footprints leading away from the camp and into the forest. Bare footprints. Human-sized but somehow wrong, the toes too long, the stride too wide. Tom, I called, you need to see this. He came over and crouched down, studying the prints. His face went pale. Those aren't his, he said quietly. How do you know? Because his boots are still in the tent, and because, he pointed to a spot where the prints were particularly clear. Look at the toes. They're not right, too long, too many joints. Marcus joined us, his hand resting on his sidearm. We need to get out of here, now. We can't leave without Cartwright, I said. Sarah, if those prints are what I think they are, Cartwright is already gone. And if we stay here after dark, we will be too. Tom stood up. Marcus is right. We mark the location, we head back, and we come back with a full team at first light. I wanted to argue, but the look in their eyes stopped me. They were scared, really scared. And if 2 experienced rangers who'd spent years in these woods were scared, I should be too. We packed up quickly, marking the campsite with GPS coordinates and taking photos of the footprints. As we started back down the trail, I looked over my shoulder one last time. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw something move in the trees beyond the camp. Something tall and pale that seemed to flow rather than walk. I didn't tell the others, I just walked faster. We made it back to the ranger station by 10 p.m., exhausted and rattled. Tom immediately got on the satellite phone to report the missing hiker to the Park Service. Marcus and I sat in the office, drinking coffee and not talking about what we'd seen. The Park Service sent a search and rescue team the next morning. 8 people, including a K-9 unit and a helicopter. They searched for 3 days. They found nothing. No trace of James Cartwright, no explanation for the strange footprints, no clues at all. It was like he'd simply vanished into the forest. On the 4th day, the search was called off. James Cartwright was officially listed as missing, presumed dead due to exposure or accident. His family was notified. The case was filed away. But I knew better, we all did. That night I sat in my cabin and tried to make sense of it all. I pulled out my laptop and started researching skinwalkers, reading everything I could find. Most of it was folklore and legend, stories passed down through generations, but certain details kept appearing across different sources. Skinwalkers were witches who had gained the power to transform by committing terrible acts, usually murder. They could take the form of any animal but preferred predators: wolves, coyotes, bears. They could also mimic human form, but never perfectly. There was always something wrong, something that gave them away. They were drawn to places of death and suffering. They were nearly impossible to kill. And they were always hungry. I thought about the Kootenai site, the place the tribe had abandoned because it had been corrupted. I thought about the pattern of disappearances, all concentrated in that area. I thought about the thing I'd seen, the wrongness of it. And I realized that Tom was right. There was something in Blackwood, something old and evil and patient, something that had been here long before the forest became a park, long before white settlers came to Montana, maybe long before humans walked this continent at all. The question was, what were we going to do about it? I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was guilt over James Cartwright, maybe it was just the need to understand. But I became obsessed with figuring out what was happening in Blackwood. I started spending my off hours in the ranger station's small library, digging through old records and reports. I found references to the Kootenai site in a 1947 survey of the area, before it became a national forest. The surveyor had noted that the local tribes refused to guide him to a particular valley, saying it was a place of bad medicine, where the spirits wore stolen skins. I found a newspaper article from 1952 about a trapper who'd gone missing in the area. His partner had reported seeing him walking into the forest in the middle of the night, naked and moving, like a puppet on strings. The partner had followed and found the trapper's clothes in a pile, but no sign of the man himself. I found a journal entry from a ranger in 1978 who'd written, "Heard the screaming again last night. Sounds like a woman, but I know there's no one out there. It's trying to lure us in. We need to stay away from the north section." The more I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Every few years, something would happen. A disappearance, a sighting, an incident that couldn't be explained. And it was always in the same area, always following the same script. The thing would mimic something familiar, a person, a voice, a cry for help, and lure someone into the forest, and they would never be seen again. "You're going to drive yourself crazy," Marcus said one evening, finding me surrounded by papers and old maps. "I need to understand it," I said. "There has to be a way to stop it." "Stop it, Sarah. People have been trying to deal with this thing for over a century. The Kootenai couldn't stop it. The Park Service can't stop it. What makes you think we can?" "Because we have to try. Because if we don't, more people are going to die." Marcus sat down across from me. You want to know what I think? I think some things aren't meant to be understood. I think some things are just wrong, glitches in reality, and the best we can do is avoid them and warn others to do the same. That's not good enough. It's kept me alive for 6 years. I looked at him. Has it ever come after you directly? He was quiet for a moment. Once, 3 years ago, I was doing a winter patrol solo up near Clearwater Creek. I heard someone calling my name, a woman's voice. It sounded like my ex-wife. I knew it couldn't be her. She was in California and she wouldn't have known where I was, but the voice was perfect. Every inflection, every detail. It called to me for hours, moving through the trees, always just out of sight. I followed it for almost a mile before I realized what I was doing. I turned around and ran back to the trail. The voice followed me all the way back to the ranger station. It stopped at the tree line and I heard it laugh. It sounded like my ex-wife laughing, but wrong. Like there was something else underneath, something that had never been human. Jesus, I whispered. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that, and I've never gone into that part of the forest alone again. Why didn't you leave, transfer somewhere else? Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because I'm stubborn, and because someone needs to be here to warn people to try to keep them safe. Tom's been doing it for 20 years. I figured I could do it for a few more. What about Tom? Has it ever come after him? You'd have to ask him, but I know he's seen things he doesn't talk about. I found Tom the next morning, checking the weather station behind the maintenance shed. The temperature had dropped below freezing overnight, and there was frost on everything. Marcus told me about Clearwater Creek, I said. Tom didn't look up from the instruments. He tell you about the voice. Yeah. It does that, mimics people you know, people you care about. It's how it hunts. Has it ever mimicked someone for you? Tom was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, my daughter. She died in a car accident in 2005. She was 16. 6 months later, I was on patrol near the Kootenai site and I heard her calling for me. Daddy, help me. I'm lost. Please, Daddy, I'm scared. I knew it wasn't her. I knew she was dead, but I still almost went to her. I got within 50 yards of the voice before I stopped myself, and I saw it just for a second, standing in the shadows wearing her face. But the eyes were wrong. They were black, completely black, and when it smiled at me, it had too many teeth. God, Tom, I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me something important. The thing out there, whatever it is, it's not just a predator. It's intelligent. It studies us. It learns what we love, what we fear, what will make us vulnerable, and it uses that against us. So how do we fight something like that? Tom finally looked at me. You don't fight it. You survive it. You learn its patterns, you avoid its territory, and you never, ever let it get inside your head. That's not enough. We need to do something. We need to. What? Kill it, trap it, exorcise it. Sarah, I've been trying to figure that out for 2 decades. I've consulted with tribal elders, paranormal investigators, cryptozoologists, anyone who might have answers. You know what I've learned? No one knows how to stop it. The best the Kootenai could do was avoid the area and warn others to do the same, and even that didn't always work. There has to be something in the records, some clue, some pattern we're missing. Tom sighed. There's one thing, but it's not much. What? The disappearances. They're not random, they follow a cycle. Every 7 years there's a spike in activity. More sightings, more incidents, more people going missing. The last spike was in 2016, which means the next one is this year, I finished. Yeah, and we're right in the middle of it. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. How many people usually disappear during a spike? 3 to 5. We're at 1 so far, James Cartwright. So there could be more. There will be more, unless we can figure out a way to stop it. I thought about this. What if we went to the Kootenai site? What if we tried to understand what happened there, why it's the center of all this activity? Tom shook his head. Too dangerous, especially now during the spike. But if we could find out what it wants, what it's doing there. Sarah, listen to me. I know you want to help. I know you want to solve this. But the best thing you can do is stay away from that place. Don't go near it. Don't investigate it. Don't even think about it too hard. Because the more attention you pay to it, the more it pays attention to you. But I couldn't let it go. That night, I pulled out the topographic maps and studied the area around the Kootenai site. It was in a valley, surrounded by steep ridges, accessible only by a narrow trail that branched off from the North Ridge Loop. According to the maps, there was a small clearing in the center of the valley, marked with a symbol I didn't recognize. I cross-referenced it with the old survey documents and found a description. Circular clearing, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Stone formations arranged in a pattern. Local tribes report this as a ceremonial site, now abandoned. Recommend avoiding area due to difficult terrain and lack of established trails. Stone formations, a ceremonial site, something the Kootenai had used and then abandoned when it became corrupted. I needed to see it for myself. I knew Tom and Marcus would try to stop me if I told them what I was planning, so I didn't tell them. On October 23rd, I waited until they were both out on patrol, then packed a day bag with supplies, my camera, and my sidearm. I left a note in my cabin saying I was doing a solo hike on the South Ridge Trail, the opposite direction from where I was actually going. Then I headed north, toward the Kootenai site. The trail was overgrown and barely visible in places. It was clear that no one had used it in years. The forest here felt different, darker, quieter, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. I didn't hear any birds. I didn't see any animals. There was just the sound of my boots on the trail and my own breathing. It took me 3 hours to reach the valley. The trail descended steeply, switchbacking down a rocky slope, and then opened into the clearing. I stopped at the edge and stared. The clearing was exactly as described, a perfect circle, maybe 50 feet across, surrounded by towering pines. In the center were the stone formations, large rocks arranged in a spiral pattern, leading to a flat stone altar in the middle. The ground was bare dirt, nothing growing, as if the earth itself was dead. But that wasn't what made me freeze. Around the perimeter of the clearing, hanging from the trees, were dozens of objects. At first I thought they were wind chimes or decorations. Then I got closer and realized what they were. Bones, animal bones mostly. Deer skulls, bird skeletons, the vertebrae of something large, but mixed in with them were other things. A child's shoe, a backpack, a watch, a wedding ring on a chain, personal items, belongings of people who'd disappeared. And in the center of the clearing, on the altar stone, was a pile of clothes, fresh clothes, a flannel shirt, jeans, hiking boots. James Cartwright's clothes. I felt sick. I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures, documenting everything. The stone formations, the hanging bones, the clothes, evidence, proof that something terrible was happening here. That's when I heard it. A voice calling from the trees. Sarah. I spun around, my hand going to my sidearm. There was no one there. Sarah, help me. The voice was coming from the forest to my left. It sounded like Tom. I'm hurt, please, Sarah, I need help. I knew it wasn't Tom. I knew it was the thing trying to lure me in. But the voice was so perfect, so convincing. I could hear the pain in it, the fear. Sarah, please, it's got me, it's... The voice cut off with a scream. A horrible, wet scream that sounded like Tom being torn apart. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan, just ran toward the sound. Because even though I knew it wasn't real, even though I knew it was a trap, I couldn't stand the thought of Tom being hurt. I crashed through the undergrowth, following the screams. They led me deeper into the forest, away from the clearing, into a part of the woods so thick with trees that almost no light penetrated. And then the screaming stopped. I stood in the sudden silence, my heart pounding, my breath coming in gasps. I was lost. I'd run blindly without paying attention to direction or landmarks. I had no idea where I was. Stupid, I whispered to myself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I pulled out my GPS unit. The screen flickered, then went dark. Dead battery, even though I'd charged it that morning. I tried my compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to find north. I was alone in the forest with no way to navigate, and something was out here with me. I heard a sound behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps. I turned and saw it. It was standing maybe 30 feet away, partially hidden by the trees. It looked like a man, tall, naked, pale skin covered in dirt and what might have been blood. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, hanging down past the knees. The head was too small for the body. And the face. The face was Tom's face, but wrong, like a mask that didn't quite fit. The eyes were too far apart. The mouth was too wide. And when it smiled at me, I saw that Marcus had been right. Too many teeth, rows and rows of them like a shark. "Hello, Sarah," it said in Tom's voice. "I've been waiting for you." I pulled my gun and fired. 3 shots, center mass, just like I'd been trained. The bullets hit. I saw the impact, saw the thing stagger back. But there was no blood, and after a moment it straightened up and smiled wider. "That won't work," it said. "Nothing you have will work." It started walking toward me. I ran. I ran through the forest like a terrified animal, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me. I could hear it behind me, not running, just walking with that same steady, deliberate pace. It didn't need to run. It knew I couldn't escape. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours. The forest all looked the same, endless trees and shadows. I was completely lost, exhausted, my lungs burning. And then I saw light ahead, a break in the trees. I burst out of the forest and found myself on a trail. A familiar trail. The North Ridge Trail, the same one I'd hiked on my first patrol. I'd somehow made it back to known territory. I looked behind me. The thing was standing at the edge of the trees, watching me. It didn't follow. It just stood there, wearing Tom's face, smiling its terrible smile. "See you soon, Sarah," it called in Tom's voice. Then it turned and walked back into the forest, its 2 long arms swinging, its movements fluid and wrong. I ran all the way back to the ranger station. It was dark by the time I got there. Tom and Marcus were in the office, and they looked furious. "Where the hell have you been?" Tom demanded. "We've been trying to radio you for hours. We were about to send out a search party." I collapsed into a chair, still shaking. I went to the Kootenai site. The anger drained from Tom's face, replaced by something like horror. "You what?" I had to see it. I had to understand. "Jesus Christ, Sarah, do you have any idea how stupid that was? How dangerous?" "I saw it," I said. "The thing, it came after me. It looked like you, Tom. It sounded like you. It tried to lure me deeper into the forest." Marcus and Tom exchanged a look. "But you got away," Marcus said. "It let me go, I think. I made it back to the trail and it just stopped, like it couldn't follow me there." Tom sat down heavily. "The trails. It stays off the established trails. I've noticed that before, but I wasn't sure. But if you're right, if it won't follow onto the trails." "Then that's a weakness," I finished. "Something we can use." "Maybe," Tom said. "Or maybe it's just playing with us, letting us think we're safe." I pulled out my camera. I got pictures of the clearing, the stone formations, the bones, and the clothes. James Cartwright's clothes were there on the altar. Tom took the camera and scrolled through the images. His face went pale. "This is evidence," he said quietly. "Real evidence. We can take this to the authorities, show them that something is happening here." "Will they believe us?" I asked. "Probably not, but it's more than we've had before." Marcus was looking at one of the photos, a close-up of the stone altar. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to something I hadn't noticed before. I looked closer. There were symbols carved into the altar stone. Not English, not any language I recognized. They looked old, worn by time and weather. I don't know, I said. Some kind of writing. Tom pulled out his phone and took a picture of the camera screen. I know someone who might be able to translate this. A professor at the University of Montana who specializes in Native American languages and symbols. I'll send it to him. Do you think it means something? I asked. Everything means something, Tom said. The question is whether we can figure it out in time. Professor Michael Whitehorse called back 3 days later. Tom put him on speakerphone so Marcus and I could listen. The symbols are old, Whitehorse said. Pre-contact, possibly pre-Columbian. They're a variant of a Proto-Salician script that was used by shamans for ceremonial purposes. I had to consult with several colleagues to get a rough translation. What does it say? Tom asked. It's a warning, or maybe a binding spell. The translation is imperfect, but it's something like, "Here lies the skin stealer, bound by blood and stone. Feed it or flee it, but never free it." Silence in the office. Then Marcus said, "Feed it." That's what the text says. The implication is that the site was used for some kind of ritual sacrifice. Animals, probably. Maybe humans in extreme cases. The sacrifices were meant to appease whatever was bound there, to keep it from hunting freely. And if it's not fed, I asked. Then it hunts on its own, which, based on what you've told me, is exactly what's been happening. Tom leaned forward. Professor, is there anything in the text about how to kill it, or permanently bind it? No, but there's a reference to the 7-year hunger. It suggests that the entity's power waxes and wanes on a 7-year cycle. During the peak of the cycle, it's strongest and most active. During the low points, it's dormant or nearly so. The 7-year cycle, just like Tom had said. We're in a peak year, Tom said, which means it's at full strength. I'm afraid so, Whitehorse said. If the pattern holds, you can expect increased activity through the end of October, possibly into early November. After that, it should go dormant again. Should, Marcus muttered. Professor, is there anything else you can tell us? Tom asked. Anything that might help us deal with this thing? Only this, the text refers to it as the one who wears many skins. The implication is that it's not a shapeshifter in the traditional sense. It doesn't transform, it collects. It takes the skins, the appearances, the voices, the mannerisms of its victims and wears them. The more it kills, the more forms it can take. I thought about the bones hanging in the clearing. Dozens of them, decades worth of victims. How many forms could it have? I asked. Based on what you've described, potentially hundreds. Everyone who's ever disappeared in that forest, everyone it's ever killed. It could be any of them. After we hung up, the three of us sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Marcus said, "We need to close the park. Shut down the north section entirely, at least until the cycle passes." "We can't," Tom said. "We don't have the authority, and even if we did, how would we explain it? We can't tell people there's a skin-stealing monster in the forest. They'd think we were insane." "So what do?" I asked. "Just wait for more people to disappear." "We do what we've always done," Tom said. "We watch. We warn people away from the dangerous areas. We respond to emergencies. And we hope we can make it through the next few weeks without anyone else dying." But I couldn't accept that. There had to be a way to stop it, to end this once and for all. That night I went back to the research. I read everything I could find about skinwalkers, about binding rituals, about entities that fed on human life. And I found something interesting. In Navajo tradition, skinwalkers could be killed, but only with specific weapons. Bullets dipped in white ash, knives made of bone, and they had to be called by their true name, their human name from before they became a monster. But this thing wasn't a Navajo skinwalker. It was something else, something older. The Kootenai had tried to bind it, not kill it, which suggested that maybe it couldn't be killed, at least not by conventional means. But it could be bound. The altar, the stone formations, the symbols, they were all part of a binding ritual. The Kootenai had trapped the thing in that valley, had used blood sacrifice to keep it contained. But at some point the sacrifices had stopped. Maybe the tribe had been displaced, or maybe they'd simply decided the cost was too high, and without the sacrifices the binding had weakened. The thing had started to hunt again. What if we could renew the binding? What if we could trap it again, permanently this time? I brought the idea to Tom and Marcus the next morning. Tom shook his head immediately. We don't know how to perform the ritual. We don't have the knowledge or the training. We could make things worse. How could they be worse? I argued. People are dying. More people will die. At least this way we'd be trying to do something. Sarah, these kinds of rituals require specific components. Blood, usually. Sometimes human blood. Are you prepared to make that kind of sacrifice? I hesitated. If it would stop the thing, yes. No, Tom said firmly. Absolutely not. I won't allow it. It's not your decision. It is when you're under my supervision. Sarah, I understand your frustration. I've felt it for 20 years, but we can't just improvise a binding ritual and hope it works. We could end up feeding the thing instead of containing it. Marcus spoke up. What if we consulted with someone who knows about these rituals? A Kootenai elder, maybe. Someone who might remember the old ways. Tom considered this. It's possible. I know a few people on the Flathead Reservation. I could make some calls. Do it, I said. Please, we're running out of time. Tom made the calls. Most people didn't want to talk about it. The Kootenai site was taboo, a place of bad medicine that was best left alone. But finally, he found someone willing to help. An elder named Joseph Running Bear, who was in his 80s and remembered stories his grandfather had told him about the valley. We drove to the Flathead Reservation the next day, all three of us. Joseph lived in a small house on the outskirts of the reservation, surrounded by pine trees and mountains. He was waiting for us on his porch, a thin man with long white hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. "You're the Rangers from Blackwood," he said as we approached. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Tom said. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." Joseph nodded. "Come inside, we'll talk." His house was small and cluttered, filled with books and artifacts and the smell of sage. He made us tea, and we sat around his kitchen table. "You want to know about the valley," Joseph said, "the place where the skin stealer lives." "Yes," Tom said, "we need to know how to stop it." Joseph was quiet for a long time, staring into his tea. Then he said, "My grandfather was a shaman. He was one of the last to perform the old rituals before the government made us stop. He told me about the valley, about what lived there." "What is it?" I asked. "We don't have a name for it in English. In our language, we call it Apsaluk Isikpuatakuk. It means the one who steals and wears. It's old. Older than the tribes, older than the mountains. It was here before humans came to this land, and it will be here after we're gone." "Where did it come from?" Marcus asked. "No one knows. Some say it's a spirit that went mad. Some say it's a punishment from the Creator for some ancient sin. Some say it's just a thing that exists, like a storm or a wildfire. A force of nature that can't be reasoned with or controlled." "But your people did control it," I said. "The binding ritual." Joseph nodded. "Yes, hundreds of years ago the thing was killing freely. Whole villages disappeared. The shamans came together and performed a great ritual. They lured it to the valley and bound it there with blood and stone and sacred words. And they made a pact. Every 7 years, during the time when its hunger was strongest, they would make a sacrifice. An animal, usually, a deer or an elk. The blood would feed the binding, keep it strong." "But the sacrifices stopped," Tom said. "Yes. When the white men came, when we were forced onto reservations, the old ways were forbidden. The shamans died without passing on their knowledge. The rituals were forgotten, and the binding weakened. The thing started to hunt again. "Can the binding be renewed?" I asked. Joseph looked at me with those penetrating eyes. "Yes, but it requires a sacrifice, and not just any sacrifice. It must be willing. Someone must choose to give their blood, their life, to strengthen the binding." "A human sacrifice," Marcus said quietly. "Yes." "That's not an option," Tom said firmly. "Then the thing will continue to hunt," Joseph said. "Every 7 years it will kill, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." "There has to be another way," I said. Joseph shook his head. "The binding is the only way. Without it, the thing is too powerful. It can't be killed by any weapon you possess. It can't be trapped or contained by any means except the ritual." "What about weakening it?" Marcus asked. "Is there a way to reduce its power without killing it?" Joseph considered this. "The thing draws strength from its victims. Every person it kills, every skin it takes makes it stronger. If you could somehow prevent it from killing, if you could starve it, it might weaken enough to be bound with a lesser sacrifice." "How long would that take?" Tom asked. "Years, decades perhaps, and you would have to keep everyone away from the valley, prevent any deaths in that area. One mistake, one victim, and it would regain its strength." We sat in silence, absorbing this. "There's one other thing," Joseph said. "The thing is bound to the valley by the ritual, but it's also bound by its nature. It can only hunt in the places where it has killed before. The blood of its victims marks the territory. If you could somehow cleanse those places, remove the blood mark, you might be able to limit its hunting ground." "How do we cleanse the places?" I asked. "Fire," Joseph said. "Sacred fire. Burn the ground where it has killed, burn the trees where it has hung its trophies. Purify the land. It won't destroy the thing, but it will confine it more tightly to the valley." "That could work," Marcus said. "We could do a controlled burn of the area around the Kootenai site. It's late in the season, but if we're careful." "It's risky," Tom said. "A fire in that terrain could get out of control quickly." "It's less risky than letting that thing keep killing," I said. Tom looked at Joseph. "If we do this, if we burn the area, will it be enough to contain the thing until the cycle passes?" "I don't know," Joseph said honestly. "But it's the best chance you have. The thing is strongest now, during the peak of the cycle. If you can limit its hunting ground, keep people away from the valley, you might be able to prevent any more deaths until it goes dormant again." "And then what?" I asked. "We just wait another 7 years for it to wake up and start killing again." "Unless you're willing to make the sacrifice necessary to renew the binding, yes." I thought about this, about James Cartwright and all the others who disappeared, about the thing wearing Tom's face, smiling at me with too many teeth. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll be the sacrifice." "No," Tom said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Tom, if it's the only way." "It's not the only way. We'll do the controlled burn. We'll keep people away from the valley. We'll find another solution." "There is no other solution," I said. "You heard Joseph. The binding requires a willing sacrifice. I'm willing." "Sarah, you don't know what you're saying. You don't understand what you'd be giving up." "I understand perfectly. I'd be giving my life to save others. That's what rangers do, isn't it? Protect and serve." Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, think about this. Really think about it. You'd be dying to trap something that might escape again in 7 years. Your sacrifice might buy us time, but it won't solve the problem permanently." "Then it's time we need," I said. "Time to figure out a permanent solution. Time to keep people safe." Joseph was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "You have courage," he said, "but courage alone is not enough. The ritual requires more than just a willing sacrifice. It requires knowledge of the sacred words, the proper timing, the correct offerings. I can teach you these things, but it will take time, and you must be certain. Once the ritual begins, there is no turning back." How much time? I asked. A week, maybe two. The ritual must be performed during the dark of the moon, when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The next dark moon is November 4th. 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks to prepare. Teach me, I said. Tom tried to talk me out of it. Every day, multiple times a day, he would pull me aside and try to convince me that there had to be another way. But I'd made up my mind. I'd seen what the thing could do. I'd seen the bones hanging in the clearing, the evidence of decades of killing. If my death could stop it, even temporarily, it was worth it. Marcus was quieter about his objections, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He started treating me differently, more gently, like I was already a ghost. Joseph came to the ranger station and began teaching me the ritual. It was complex, involving specific words in the Kootenai language, specific movements, specific offerings. I had to memorize everything perfectly. One mistake could invalidate the ritual, or, worse, strengthen the thing instead of binding it. The ritual is a bargain, Joseph explained. You offer your life, your blood, your essence. In exchange, the thing is bound to the valley, unable to hunt beyond its borders. But the bargain must be made correctly, or the thing will simply take your life and give nothing in return. We practiced every day. Joseph would recite the words and I would repeat them over and over until they were burned into my memory. He taught me the proper way to arrange the stones, the proper way to make the offerings, the proper way to call the thing to the altar. You must not show fear, he said. The thing feeds on fear. If you hesitate, if you show weakness, it will sense it and the ritual will fail. I won't hesitate, I said. We'll see. While I was learning the ritual, Tom and Marcus were preparing for the controlled burn. They mapped out the area around the Kootenai site, identifying the places where victims had been killed or where the thing had been sighted. They coordinated with the fire management team, got the necessary permits, and planned the burn for November 2nd, 2 days before the dark moon. We'll burn everything within a half-mile radius of the valley, Tom explained, showing me the map. It'll take out most of the forest where the thing has been active. With luck, it'll confine it to the valley itself. And if it doesn't work, I asked, then we'll have burned a lot of forest for nothing, but at least we'll have tried. The days passed quickly. I continued my regular duties, going on patrols, checking campsites, maintaining trails. But my mind was always on the ritual, on what I would have to do. I thought about calling my ex-husband, my parents, my friends back in Seattle. I thought about saying goodbye, but what would I say? How could I explain what I was about to do? They'd think I was crazy. They'd try to stop me. So I said nothing. I just went through the motions of my life, knowing that in 2 weeks it would all be over. On October 30th, we had our first snowfall. Just a dusting, but it was a reminder that winter was coming. Soon the forest would be locked in ice and snow, and the thing would go dormant, waiting for spring. If I could complete the ritual, it would stay dormant for 7 years. 7 years of safety. 7 years for someone to find a permanent solution. It had to be enough. On November 1st, Joseph declared me ready. You know the words, he said. You know the movements. You understand what must be done. Yes. Then there is only one thing left. He reached into his bag and pulled out a knife. It was old, the blade made of napped obsidian, the handle wrapped in leather. This is a sacred blade. It has been used in rituals for generations. You will use it to make the final offering. I took the knife. It was heavier than I expected and sharp enough to cut with the slightest pressure. When the time comes, Joseph said, you must cut here. He indicated his left wrist. Deep enough to sever the artery. The blood must flow onto the altar stone while you speak the final words. When the words are complete, the thing will be bound and you will die. Your spirit will become part of the binding, holding the thing in place. Will it hurt? I asked. Yes, but the pain will not last long. I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. There is still time to change your mind, Joseph said gently. No one would think less of you. I'm not changing my mind. Then may the Creator watch over you, Sarah Winters. You are very brave. The controlled burn happened on November 2nd. It took all day, with Tom and Marcus and a team of firefighters carefully setting and managing the blaze. I watched from a distance as smoke rose into the gray sky as the forest burned. By evening it was done. Half a square mile of forest reduced to ash and blackened stumps. The valley itself was untouched, too risky to burn that close to the stone formations, but everything around it was gone. It's done, Tom said, his face smudged with soot. The thing's hunting ground is gone. It's confined to the valley now. Until the forest grows back, Marcus said. That'll take years, decades maybe. By then we'll have figured out something else. I didn't tell them that there wouldn't be a we in 2 days. I just nodded and helped them pack up the equipment. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my cabin and listened to the wind and thought about what I was about to do. I thought about my life, about all the choices that had led me here. The failed marriage, the burnout, the desperate need to escape to somewhere remote and wild. I'd come to Blackwood looking for peace. Instead, I'd found purpose. Maybe that was enough. November 4th dawned cold and clear, the dark moon, the day of the ritual. I got up before sunrise and packed my gear. The knife, the offerings Joseph had prepared, sage, tobacco, cornmeal, a copy of the ritual words just in case I forgot. I dressed in layers, knowing I'd be out in the cold for hours. Tom was waiting for me outside my cabin. You're really going to do this, he said. Yes. I can't let you. You can't stop me. We stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, two stubborn people who'd both seen too much. Sarah, please, there has to be another way. There isn't, you know there isn't. Then let me do it. Let me be the sacrifice. I'm older, I've lived my life. You have so much ahead of you. I shook my head. It has to be me. I'm the one who learned the ritual. I'm the one who's ready. I could learn it. Joseph could teach me. There's no time. The dark moon is today. If we wait another month, the thing will have killed again. Tom's shoulders slumped. I've lost too many people to this forest. I can't lose you too. You're not losing me. I'm choosing this. There's a difference. He pulled me into a hug and I felt him shaking. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he whispered. Or the stupidest. He laughed, a broken sound. Maybe both. Marcus joined us a few minutes later. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "For the hike." Thanks. We're coming with you, he said. To the edge of the valley. We'll wait there until it's done. You don't have to. Yes, we do. So the three of us set out together, hiking through the burned forest toward the Kootenai site. The landscape was alien now, all black stumps and ash. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. It was like walking through the aftermath of the apocalypse. We reached the valley at noon. The clearing was exactly as I remembered it. The stone formations, the altar, the bones hanging from the trees. But something was different. The air felt charged, electric, like the moment before a lightning strike. It knows, Joseph said. He'd met us at the trailhead, insisting on accompanying us to the valley. It knows what you're planning. It will try to stop you. How? I asked. By getting inside your head, by making you doubt, by showing you things that will break your resolve. You must stay focused on the ritual. No matter what you see or hear, you must complete it. I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart. Tom and Marcus stopped at the edge of the clearing. This is as far as we go, Tom said. The ritual has to be performed alone. I know. I hugged them both, trying to memorize the feeling. Then I turned and walked into the clearing. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The light dimmed, even though it was the middle of the day, and I felt it watching me. The thing, the skin stealer, the ancient evil that had haunted this valley for centuries. I walked to the altar and began to arrange the stones according to Joseph's instructions. As I worked, I heard sounds in the forest around me, footsteps, whispers, my name being called in voices I recognized. I ignored them. I focused on the ritual. When the stones were arranged, I placed the offerings on the altar. Sage, tobacco, cornmeal. Each one had a specific meaning, a specific purpose in the binding. Then I began to speak the words, the ancient Kootenai phrases that Joseph had taught me, words of binding and sacrifice and power. The thing emerged from the trees. It was wearing my face. I saw myself walking toward the altar, naked and pale, moving with that same wrong, fluid gait. It smiled at me with my smile, but the eyes were black and empty. "Hello, Sarah," it said in my voice. "Do you really think this will work?" I kept speaking the words, not letting myself be distracted. "You're going to die for nothing," it said. "The binding will fail, I'll be free, and I'll kill everyone you care about. Tom, Marcus, your family, everyone." I raised my voice, speaking the words louder, more forcefully. The thing that wore my face began to change. It cycled through forms, one after another. James Cartwright, David Kowalski, the woman from Oregon, dozens of people I didn't recognize, all the victims it had claimed over the years. "Look at them," it said, its voice shifting with each form. "Look at what I've done. Look at what I'll keep doing. You can't stop me. No one can stop me." I reached the final verse of the ritual. My hands were shaking as I picked up the obsidian knife. The thing rushed toward me, moving impossibly fast. It was 10 feet away, 5 feet, close enough that I could smell it, a stench of rot and old blood. I pressed the blade to my wrist and spoke the final words. "By blood and stone and sacred word, I bind you to this place. By my life freely given, I seal you in darkness. By my death, I make this covenant eternal." I cut. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Blood poured from my wrist onto the altar stone, hot and red. The thing screamed, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard, like all the voices of all its victims crying out at once. The stone formations began to glow with a pale blue light. The symbols carved into the altar blazed like fire. The thing tried to flee, but invisible chains seemed to wrap around it, pulling it down, binding it to the earth. I felt my strength fading. My vision was going dark at the edges. I collapsed against the altar, my blood still flowing, still feeding the binding. The last thing I saw was the thing being pulled into the ground, screaming and thrashing, until it disappeared completely. The earth sealed over it like a wound closing. Then there was nothing but darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. For a moment I thought I was dead and this was some kind of afterlife. But then I felt the pain, a deep, throbbing ache in my left wrist, and I knew I was alive. Tom was sitting in a chair next to the bed. When he saw my eyes open, he leaned forward. "Sarah, thank God." "What? How?" My throat was dry, my voice barely a whisper. "Marcus and I came into the clearing when we heard you scream. We found you collapsed at the altar, bleeding out. Marcus applied a tourniquet while I called for a medical evacuation. The helicopter got you to the hospital in Whitefish in time." I looked at my wrist. It was heavily bandaged. "You're lucky," Tom said. "Another few minutes and you would have bled out. As it is, you needed surgery and a transfusion. The doctors say you'll make a full recovery, but it was close." "The ritual," I said, "did it work?" Tom's expression was strange. "We don't know. The thing disappeared. The ground where it was standing just opened up and swallowed it. Then everything went quiet. Joseph says the binding took hold, but we won't know for sure until 7 years pass and it doesn't wake up," I finished. "Yeah." I closed my eyes. I'd failed. I was supposed to die, supposed to give my life to complete the binding, but I'd survived. which meant the ritual might not have worked. The thing might still be free. "Hey," Tom said gently. "Don't do that, don't blame yourself. You did everything right. You were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. That counts for something. But if the binding failed, then we'll deal with it together." But Joseph doesn't think it failed. He thinks your willingness to die was enough, even if you didn't actually die. The ritual required a willing sacrifice, and you were willing. The fact that we saved you doesn't change that. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed, that the thing was still out there, waiting. I spent 3 days in the hospital. Tom and Marcus visited every day, bringing me books and magazines and updates from the forest. No new disappearances, no strange sightings. Everything was quiet. On the 4th day, Joseph came to see me. "The binding holds," he said without preamble. "I went to the valley yesterday. The thing is sealed beneath the earth. I can feel it there, trapped, unable to escape." "For how long?" I asked. 7 years, maybe longer. Your sacrifice was powerful, Sarah, more powerful than any in generations. You gave everything you had, held nothing back. That kind of pure intention has weight in the spirit world. But I didn't die. Death is not always the measure of sacrifice. You were willing to die. You accepted death. That's what mattered." I wanted to feel relieved, but all I felt was tired. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you heal. You rest. You let your body and spirit recover from what you've been through. And in 7 years. In 7 years, we'll see if the binding still holds. If it does, we'll perform a renewal ritual, a lesser one not requiring death. If it doesn't," he shrugged, "then we'll deal with that when the time comes." I was released from the hospital on November 10th. Tom drove me back to Blackwood, and I spent the next few weeks recovering in my cabin. My wrist healed slowly, leaving a thick scar that I knew would never fully fade. The forest was quiet. The first heavy snows came in late November, blanketing everything in white. The few trails that remained open saw almost no traffic. It was just me, Tom, and Marcus, living in our small compound at the edge of the wilderness. I thought about leaving, going back to Seattle, finding a normal job, trying to rebuild the life I'd left behind. But I couldn't. Blackwood had become part of me, and I'd become part of it. For better or worse, this was where I belonged now. In December, I went back to the Kootenai site. I had to see it, had to know for sure. The valley was buried in snow, pristine and peaceful. The stone formations were barely visible, just dark shapes beneath the white. The altar was covered, the symbols hidden. I stood at the edge of the clearing and listened. There was nothing, no sense of being watched, no feeling of malevolence, just the quiet of winter and the whisper of wind through the trees. It was over for now. I turned and walked back to the trail, my boots crunching in the snow. Behind me, the valley lay silent and still, holding its terrible secret beneath the frozen earth. November 4th, 2030. I'm sitting in the ranger station office, writing this account. It's been 7 years since the ritual, 7 years since I bound the thing beneath the earth. 7 years of watching and waiting. Tom retired 3 years ago. He lives in Whitefish now, but he calls every week to check in. Marcus is still here, still doing the job, still watching the forest with those careful eyes. I'm the head ranger now. It's my responsibility to keep people safe. Navajo Nation border, northern Arizona, October 2019. I still can't sleep without the lights on. It's been 3 years since that October, 3 years since I walked out of the Kaibab National Forest alone, and I still wake up screaming at 3:47 a.m., the exact time I heard Sarah's voice calling to me from the darkness, even though Sarah was already dead. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm the only one who made it out. The only one who survived what we found on the Whisper Trail. The authorities never believed my story, not really. How could they? I barely believe it myself, and I was there. I saw what happened. I saw what they became. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when we were still 5 friends planning what we thought would be an adventure. Back when the worst thing we worried about was whether we'd packed enough beer. It was Jake's idea. Like most of our bad ideas were Jake's. We'd been friends since college, Jake, Sarah, Tommy, Reese, and me. And we'd made it a tradition to take one big camping trip every year. Usually, we stuck to the popular trails, the ones with ranger stations and cell service and other hikers who could help if something went wrong. But Jake had been researching, the way he always did when he got obsessed with something, and he'd found something he called the holy grail of hiking trails. The Whisper Trail, he announced one night at our favorite bar in Flagstaff, spreading a photocopied map across the sticky table. Nobody's heard of it. It's not on any official park maps, but it's real. Sarah leaned in, her dark hair falling across her face as she studied the map. She was always the cautious one, the planner. If it's not on official maps, Jake, there's probably a reason for that. Yeah, Tommy laughed, already 3 beers in. The reason is it doesn't exist, and Jake's been huffing too much of that artisanal coffee he's always drinking. But Jake was insistent. He'd found references to the trail in old surveyor's notes from the 1920s, back before the Kaibab National Forest was fully established. The trail supposedly ran along the border between the National Forest and Navajo Nation land, cutting deep into a section of wilderness that had been deliberately left undeveloped. Look, Jake said, pointing to a scanned document on his phone. This surveyor, guy named William Ashford, he mapped the whole thing in 1923, called it the Whisper Trail because of the way the wind moved through the canyon. He said it was the most beautiful and unsettling place he'd ever been. Unsettling, Reese repeated, raising an eyebrow. She was the thrill-seeker among us, always pushing for the next adrenaline rush. I like unsettling. I should have paid more attention to that word. Unsettling. But I was 28 years old and stupid, and the idea of finding some forgotten trail that nobody else knew about appealed to the part of me that still wanted to believe there were secrets left in the world. Why'd they stop maintaining it? I asked. Jake's expression flickered just for a second with something I couldn't quite read. The notes don't say. Ashford's last entry just says the trail should be left to the old ways and that he wouldn't be returning. After that, nothing. The trail just disappeared from the records. Jesus, Jake, Sarah said, that's not ominous at all. But we went anyway. Of course we went. We were young and arrogant and convinced that bad things happened to other people, not to us. We'd been camping dozens of times. We had good gear, experience, and each other. What could possibly go wrong? Everything could go wrong. We set out on October 15th, driving Jake's SUV as far as we could along an old logging road that had been reclaimed by the forest. The trailhead, if you could call it that, was marked only by a cairn of stones that looked like it had been there for decades. Someone had carved a symbol into the largest stone, something that looked almost like a handprint but wrong somehow. The fingers were too long, the proportions off. Probably just some old surveyor's mark, Jake said when I pointed it out. The first day of hiking was beautiful. The trail wound through stands of ponderosa pine and Douglas fir, the October air crisp and clean. We saw elk in the distance, heard the calls of ravens overhead. It felt like we'd stepped back in time, into a version of the forest that existed before humans had mapped and tamed it. We made camp that first night in a clearing beside a stream. The water was so clear you could see every stone on the bottom, and so cold it made your teeth ache. Tommy caught 2 trout for dinner, and we cooked them over the fire while passing around a bottle of whiskey. This is perfect, Sarah said, leaning against my shoulder. We'd been dating for 6 months, and I was planning to propose to her at the end of the trip. I had the ring in my backpack, wrapped in a sock at the bottom of my sleeping bag. Jake, I take back everything I said. This was a great idea. Jake grinned, looking vindicated. Told you, This place is special." He had no idea how right he was. That night I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. The fire had burned down to embers, and the forest was absolutely silent. Not the peaceful silence of nature, but something else. Something that felt like the world was holding its breath. I walked about 30 feet from camp, far enough for privacy, and that's when I heard it for the first time. Whispering. It was so faint I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, words just at the edge of comprehension. I stood there in the darkness, my headlamp cutting a weak cone of light through the trees, and listened. The whispering stopped. I hurried back to camp and crawled into my tent, pressing close to Sarah's warmth. I told myself it was just the wind, just the forest settling, just my imagination. But I didn't sleep well for the rest of the night. The second day, we went deeper. The trail became less defined, sometimes disappearing entirely for stretches where we had to navigate by Jake's GPS and the old surveyor's notes. The forest changed too. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to block out the sun. The undergrowth became thicker, more tangled, and the silence persisted. No birds, no insects, nothing but the sound of our boots on the trail and our own breathing. "Anyone else notice how quiet it is?" Reese asked around noon. "It's October," Tommy said. "Birds migrate, bugs die off, it's normal." But it didn't feel normal, it felt wrong. We found the first marker around 3 p.m. It was a tree, a massive ponderosa that must have been hundreds of years old, and someone had carved symbols all around its trunk. Not the random graffiti of bored hikers, but deliberate, intricate patterns that spiraled around the bark. They looked almost like the petroglyphs I'd seen in books about Native American rock art, but different. Older, somehow. "What the hell is this?" Sarah asked, running her fingers over the carvings. Jake was taking pictures, his face lit up with excitement. "This is incredible. These could be pre-Columbian, maybe even older." "Or someone just carved them last week," I said, but I didn't believe it. The carvings were weathered, grown over in places where the tree had tried to heal itself. They'd been there for a long, long time. At the base of the tree we found bones. Small ones, rabbits, squirrels, maybe a fox. They'd been arranged in a circle, each skull facing outward. "Okay, that's creepy," Reese said, but she was smiling. She thought it was all part of the adventure, some weird art installation or forgotten ritual site. She didn't understand yet that we should have turned back right then. We made camp a mile past the carved tree, in a small depression surrounded by rocks. The sun set early, the shadows growing long and deep. As we set up our tents, I noticed something odd. The rocks around our campsite were all the same type, a dark basalt that didn't match the geology of the rest of the area. And they were arranged too perfectly, forming an almost perfect circle. "I think this might be a ceremonial site," Jake said. "Native American, probably. We should be respectful." "We should leave," Sarah said quietly. She'd been getting more and more uneasy as the day went on. "This doesn't feel right, Jake. None of this feels right." "We're 2 days in," Jake argued. "We can't just turn back now." "Yes, we can," Sarah insisted. "That's exactly what we can do." But Jake wanted to push on, and Tommy and Reese agreed with him. I was the tiebreaker, and I made the wrong choice. I sided with Jake. I've regretted that decision every day since. That night the whispering came back. I woke to the sound of voices just outside my tent. Multiple voices, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The words were harsh, guttural, nothing like any Native American language I'd ever heard. They seemed to circle the camp, moving from tent to tent. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Don't," she whispered, "don't go out there." "Someone's out there," I said. "Maybe other hikers, maybe they need help." I stepped out into the night, and the whispering stopped instantly. The campfire had gone out completely. which was strange because we'd banked it with enough wood to last until morning. My flashlight beam swept across the campsite, illuminating the other tents, the circle of rocks, the dark trees beyond. Nothing, nobody. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded small and swallowed by the darkness. No response. I was about to go back into the tent when I saw them, footprints in the dirt near the fire pit. Bare footprints, human-shaped but wrong. The toes were too long, the heel too narrow. And they were huge, easily size 15 or 16. The prints circled our entire camp. I woke the others. We built up the fire and sat around it for the rest of the night, taking turns keeping watch. Nobody slept. We didn't talk about what the footprints might mean, but I could see the fear in everyone's eyes. When dawn finally came, the footprints were gone. The dirt where they'd been was smooth and undisturbed, as if they'd never existed at all. "We're leaving," Sarah said. "Right now, we're packing up and we're leaving." This time everyone agreed. Even Jake looked shaken. But when we tried to backtrack, we couldn't find the trail. It should have been impossible. We had GPS, we had Jake's maps, we had our own footprints from the day before, but the trail was just gone. Every direction looked the same: dense forest, thick undergrowth, no clear path. The GPS showed our location, but the trail we'd followed to get there simply didn't appear on the screen anymore. "This is impossible," Jake kept saying, staring at his phone. "This is impossible." We tried heading west, back the way we'd come. After an hour of bushwhacking through increasingly dense forest, we found ourselves back at our campsite. The circle of rocks, the dead fire pit, our tents, all exactly as we'd left them. We tried again, heading in a different direction. Same result. No matter which way we went, we ended up back at the camp. "We're going in circles," Tommy said. "We need to mark our path, make sure we're actually going straight." We tried that. We tied strips of bright orange fabric to trees as we walked, making sure to keep them in a straight line. We walked for 2 hours, never deviating from our course. We ended up back at camp, and the orange markers we'd tied, they were all there too, tied to the trees around our campsite as if we'd never left at all. That's when the real fear set in. We spent the rest of that day trying to escape. We tried following the stream, reasoning that it had to lead somewhere. It led us in a circle back to camp. We tried climbing to higher ground to get our bearings. Every ridge we climbed looked down on our campsite. We tried splitting up, thinking maybe the forest was somehow playing tricks on us when we moved as a group. We all ended up back at camp within minutes of separating. As the sun began to set on our third night, we were exhausted, terrified, and completely trapped. "This isn't natural," Reese said. She'd stopped smiling. "This is something else. Something's keeping us here." "Don't be ridiculous," Jake said, but his voice shook. "There's a rational explanation. We're just disoriented. Tomorrow in daylight we'll figure it out." But we all knew he was wrong. This wasn't disorientation. This was something else entirely. That night we kept a huge fire burning and stayed close together. We dragged all our tents into a tight cluster and agreed that nobody would leave the circle of firelight for any reason. Around midnight, we heard the first scream. It came from the forest, maybe 100 yards away. It sounded like a woman, shrieking in absolute terror and agony. The scream went on, rising and falling until it cut off abruptly. We sat frozen, staring into the darkness beyond the fire. "Should we help?" Tommy whispered. "No," Sarah said firmly. "No, we shouldn't." The scream came again, closer this time, and then we heard it, a voice calling out. "Help me, please, someone help me." It was a woman's voice, desperate and afraid. It sounded like it was coming from just beyond the trees. Tommy stood up. "We have to." "Sit down," I said, grabbing his arm. "That's not real." "How do you know?" "Because there's nobody else out here. We're alone." The voice called out again. "Please, I'm hurt. I need help." And then it changed. The voice shifted, deepened, became something that wasn't quite human. The words were the same, but the tone was wrong, like something was imitating human speech without quite understanding how it worked. "Please, I'm hurt, I need help." The words were flat now, emotionless, repeated like a recording. We heard footsteps circling the camp, heavy footsteps moving through the undergrowth, more than one set. They moved around us in a slow circle, just beyond the reach of the firelight. "What do they want?" Reese whispered. Nobody answered because we didn't know. We sat there all night, listening to the footsteps circle us, listening to the voices call out in mockery of human speech. Sometimes they sounded like people we knew. I heard my mother's voice calling my name. Sarah heard her dead sister. Jake heard his father, who died when he was 12. The things in the darkness knew us somehow. They knew how to hurt us. When dawn came, the footsteps stopped. We found tracks again, dozens of them all around our camp, the same wrong, elongated footprints, and this time they didn't disappear. Day 4 was when we started to break. Tommy wanted to make a run for it, just pick a direction and keep going no matter what. Reese wanted to stay put, reasoning that eventually someone would notice we were missing and send search parties. Jake was convinced there was a rational explanation and kept obsessively checking his GPS and maps. Sarah just sat by the fire, staring into the flames, not speaking. I tried to keep everyone together, tried to keep us focused on survival. We had enough food for maybe 3 more days if we rationed carefully. We had water from the stream. We had shelter. We could last until help arrived. But deep down, I knew help wasn't coming. We were somewhere else now, somewhere that existed alongside the normal forest but separate from it. We'd crossed a boundary we didn't understand, and we were trapped on the wrong side. That afternoon, Jake found the cave. It was hidden behind a rockfall about 50 yards from camp, a narrow opening that led down into darkness. Jake was convinced it might be a way out, or at least a more defensible position than our exposed campsite. "We should check it out," he said. "Maybe there's another exit. Maybe it leads to a different part of the forest." "Or maybe it's where those things live," Sarah said. She'd finally started talking again, but her voice was hollow. "Did you think of that, Jake? Maybe that's exactly where they want us to go." But Jake was desperate for answers, for some kind of action. He grabbed his flashlight and started toward the cave entrance. "Jake, don't," I called after him. He ignored me and disappeared into the darkness. We waited 5 minutes, 10, 15. "Jake," Tommy shouted into the cave. "Jake, come back." No response. Tommy looked at me. "We have to go after him." "No," Sarah said. "No, we don't. That's what it wants. It took Jake and now it wants the rest of us." "He's our friend," Tommy said. "He's gone," Sarah replied. But Tommy wouldn't listen. He grabbed his own flashlight and headed for the cave. Reese went with him, and I couldn't let them go alone. Sarah begged me not to go, but I kissed her and promised I'd be right back. That was the last time I saw her alive. The cave was narrow and descended steeply. Our flashlights barely penetrated the darkness, and the air grew cold and damp as we went deeper. The walls were covered in the same symbols we'd seen on the carved tree, but more of them, layered over each other in dizzying patterns. "Jake," Tommy called out. His voice echoed strangely, coming back to us distorted and wrong. We found Jake's flashlight about 50 feet down, lying on the ground, still on. But no Jake. "Where is he?" Reese whispered. That's when we heard the breathing. It came from deeper in the cave, a wet, rasping sound that didn't sound like anything human. And then we heard Jake's voice. "Guys, I'm down here. I found something. You need to see this." But the voice was wrong. It was Jake's voice, but the cadence was off, the inflection strange. It sounded like something was using Jake's voice the way a puppet master uses a puppet. "That's not him," I said. "We need to leave now." We turned to run, and that's when the lights went out. All three of our flashlights died at the same instant, plunging us into absolute darkness. I heard Reese scream, heard Tommy shouting, heard that wet breathing getting closer. I fumbled for my flashlight, shaking it, hitting it, anything to get it to work. It flickered back on and I saw it. I can't describe it properly. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. It was tall, impossibly tall, hunched over because the cave ceiling was too low. Its skin was pale and wrong, stretched too tight over bones that bent in directions bones shouldn't bend. Its face was the worst part. It looked almost human, but the proportions were all wrong, like someone had tried to make a human face from memory and gotten the details slightly off. And its eyes, God, its eyes were completely black, reflecting my flashlight beam like an animal's. It was wearing Jake's clothes. I ran. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body just moved on pure instinct. I heard Tommy and Reese behind me, their footsteps echoing in the cave. I heard that thing coming after us, moving with a horrible, skittering gait. We burst out of the cave into the fading afternoon light. I kept running, back toward camp, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I could hear Tommy behind me, but not Reese. I didn't hear Reese. I reached the camp and found Sarah gone. Her tent was shredded, torn open from the outside. There was blood on the ground, not a lot, but enough. And in the dirt, those same wrong footprints, leading away into the forest. Tommy caught up to me, gasping for breath. "Where's Sarah? Where's Reese?" "I don't know," I said. "Sarah's gone, something took her." "We have to find them," Tommy said. "We have to." He stopped mid-sentence, staring past me into the forest. I turned and saw them. There were 5 of them standing at the edge of the clearing. They looked almost human in the fading light, but I knew better now. I could see the wrongness in the way they stood, the way they moved, and they were wearing our friend's clothes. One of them was wearing Sarah's jacket. "Sarah," Tommy called out. "Sarah, is that you?" The figure in Sarah's jacket tilted its head at an unnatural angle. When it spoke, it used Sarah's voice. "Marcus, help me, I'm scared." But the words were flat, emotionless. It was mimicking her, using her voice like a recording. "That's not her," I said, grabbing Tommy's arm. "We need to go now." "Where?" Tommy asked, and I heard the despair in his voice. "Where can we go? We're trapped here." He was right, we'd tried everything. There was nowhere to run. The figures began to move closer, circling us. They moved in that same wrong way, their joints bending slightly off, their gait just a little too smooth. As they got closer, I could see their faces more clearly in the firelight. They were wearing our friends' faces. Not like masks, they'd somehow taken their actual faces. The thing wearing Sarah's jacket had Sarah's face, but it was wrong, stretched over a skull that was the wrong shape. Its eyes were black and empty. "What are you?" I screamed at them. "What do you want?" The one wearing Sarah's face smiled, and I saw that its teeth were too sharp, too numerous. "We are the old ones," it said in Sarah's voice. "We are the ones who walked before. We are the Ye Naldlushai, the Skinwalkers." I'd heard the term before in stories about Navajo legends, witches who could take the form of animals, who wore the skins of the dead. But these weren't legends. These were real, and they were here, and they'd taken my friends. "Why are you doing this?" Tommy asked. His voice was shaking. "Because you came to our place," the thing said. "You crossed the boundary, you walked the Whisper Trail, and now you belong to us." They moved closer, and I knew we were going to die. There was no escape, no way out. We were going to end up like Jake and Sarah and Reese, our skins worn by these things, our voices used to lure other victims. But then Tommy did something brave and stupid and heroic. He grabbed a burning branch from the fire and charged at them. "Run," he screamed at me. "Marcus, run." The skinwalkers converged on him. I heard him screaming, heard the wet sounds of tearing flesh, and I ran. I ran into the forest, away from the camp, away from the screams. I ran until my legs gave out and I collapsed in the darkness, gasping for breath, waiting for them to find me. But they didn't come. I lay there in the dark for hours, listening to the forest. The whispering had returned all around me, but I couldn't understand the words. I heard footsteps, heard voices calling my name in the voices of my dead friends, but I didn't move. I barely breathed. And then, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, I heard something different. A helicopter. I stumbled to my feet and ran toward the sound. The forest seemed to fight me, branches grabbing at my clothes, roots trying to trip me. But I kept going, following the sound of the helicopter. And then, impossibly, I broke through the tree line. I was standing on a ridge overlooking a valley, and below me I could see a highway. Cars were driving past. Normal, everyday cars. The helicopter was a news chopper, probably covering traffic. I'd made it out. I don't know how. Maybe the Skinwalkers let me go. Maybe Tommy's sacrifice bought me enough time to find the boundary. Maybe I just got lucky. But I was out, back in the real world. I stumbled down the ridge and flagged down a car. The driver took one look at me, covered in dirt and blood, half mad with fear and exhaustion, and called the police. They searched for the others, of course. Massive search and rescue operation, helicopters and dogs and dozens of volunteers. They found our cars at the old logging road. They found the cairn marking the trailhead. But they never found the Whisper Trail. They never found our campsite or the cave or any trace of my friends. The forest had swallowed them completely. I told them everything. The skinwalkers, the voices, the impossible geography. They nodded and took notes and exchanged glances that said they thought I was crazy or in shock or both. The official report said my friends had gotten lost and died of exposure, and that I'd survived through luck and determination. Only one person believed me. An old Navajo man came to see me in the hospital. He said his name was Thomas Begay, and that he was a Hadala, a medicine man. He'd heard about what happened and wanted to talk to me. The Yi Naldlusha are real, he told me. They are witches who have turned away from the Navajo way, who have embraced evil. They can take the skins of animals and people. They can mimic voices. They can trap you in places between worlds. Why did they let me go? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. Maybe they didn't. Maybe you're still there and this is just a dream. Or maybe they let you go so you could tell the story, so others would come looking. The Yi Naldlusha are always hungry. He gave me a small leather pouch filled with herbs and told me to keep it with me always. Then he left, and I never saw him again. That was 3 years ago. I've tried to move on, tried to rebuild my life, but I can't escape what happened on the Whisper Trail. Sometimes, late at night, I hear whispering outside my window. Sometimes I see figures standing at the edge of my yard, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. They look almost human, but not quite. And sometimes I hear Sarah's voice calling to me from the darkness. Marcus, help me, I'm scared. But I know it's not really her. Sarah is gone, along with Jake and Tommy and Reese. They're gone, and I'm here, and I don't know if I really escaped or if I'm still trapped in that forest, living out some dream while my skin is worn by something ancient and evil. I keep Thomas Begay's pouch with me always. I sleep with the lights on. I never go into the woods anymore, not even city parks. And I'm writing this down, all of it, because people need to know. If you're ever hiking in northern Arizona, near the border of the Navajo Nation, and you find an old cairn of stones with a handprint carved into it, turn back. Don't follow the trail. Don't go into that forest. Because the skinwalkers are real, and they're waiting. They're always waiting. Last week I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photograph. It showed 5 people standing around a campfire in a forest clearing. I recognized the location immediately. It was our campsite on the Whisper Trail, and I recognized 4 of the people in the photo: Jake, Sarah, Tommy, and Reese. They were smiling at the camera, their eyes black and empty. The 5th person was me. I'm looking at the photograph now as I write this. I'm studying my own face in the picture, trying to understand what it means, because I don't remember anyone taking this photo. I don't remember posing for it. And the person in the photograph, the one who looks like me, is smiling in a way I've never smiled. The expression is wrong, the angle of the head slightly off. I'm starting to wonder if Thomas Begay was right. Maybe I never really left the forest. Maybe I'm still there, trapped in that circle of stones, while something else wears my skin and lives my life. Or maybe I did escape, but I brought something back with me. I hear whispering outside my window right now. It's 3:47 a.m. and something is calling my name in Sarah's voice. I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to open the door. I'm going to sit here with the lights on and Thomas Begay's pouch clutched in my hand, and I'm going to wait for morning. But I'm starting to think morning might never come. The whispering is getting louder, and I can see shadows moving past my window, tall and wrong, with joints that bend in directions joints shouldn't bend. They've found me. After 3 years, they've finally found me. I don't know if anyone will ever read this. I don't know if I'll survive the night. But if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, then please remember what I've told you. Stay away from the Whisper Trail. Stay away from the old places, the forgotten places, the places where the boundary between worlds grows thin. And if you ever hear someone calling your name from the darkness, in a voice you recognize, don't answer. It's not who you think it is. It's never who you think it is. The door is opening now. I didn't unlock it. I didn't touch it. But it's opening anyway, and I can see them standing in the hallway, wearing the faces of my friends. Sarah is in front. She's smiling at me with too many teeth. "Marcus," she says in her voice that isn't her voice, "we've been waiting for you. It's time to come home." I'm clutching the pouch, whispering prayers I don't really believe in, and The manuscript ends here. Marcus Webb's body was found in his apartment on October 15, 2022, exactly 3 years after he emerged from the Kaibab National Forest. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack, though the responding officers noted several unusual details. All the lights in the apartment were on, the door was locked from the inside, and there were muddy footprints throughout the apartment that didn't match Marcus's shoes. The footprints appeared to belong to at least 5 different people, all barefoot, all with unusually long toes. The photograph mentioned in the manuscript was never found. The Whisper Trail remains absent from all official maps of the Kaibab National Forest, and park rangers deny any knowledge of its existence. However, every few years, hikers go missing in that area, always in groups of 4 or 5, always in October. Search parties never find any trace of them, and sometimes, late at night, rangers report hearing voices in the forest, familiar voices, calling out for help in flat, emotionless tones. They've learned not to answer.